Well, hello everyone. This is Robert Fleming, and I think that we're supposed to be hearing from Bruce Reynoso, who
I am here.
is a regular person, so I'm trying to promote you, Bruce. But
well, thank you. I'll take the promotion and the pay raise. But
pay raise.
Hello, Robert. I finally got through here. It says I'm waiting to view your screen. I don't know what that means, but I will just continue. Are we ready to start?
Yep, we are.
Okay, so today's armchair chat is about the highlights from Stetson this year, and I just wanted to mention a couple of things to people before we got started. We'll be sending out a list of armchair chats that are planned for 2021. It's really for you to do a little planning in your calendar, like furniture being rearranged. The topics and speakers of armchair chats can always change. Also, I would be remiss to remind everyone that our annual meeting this spring will again be virtual, and there's a little bit about that on our members homepage now, but more will be forthcoming. I really don't think our starring speakers today need any introduction, and I have enjoyed being able to ask people to tell me little known facts about themselves to share. And I thought in this case I would ask each of our speakers to share a little known fact about the other. And that turned out to be pretty amazing. And you know, here at the Armchair Chats, we always check our facts first. So we scoured the internet, and in fact, it turns out that Robert Fleming is well known for writing erotic fiction and also for writing horror fiction. And also equally amazing, Robert Fechtman in 2011 won an Art Directors Guild Award for his work on the motion picture Inception. And in 2020, he won again for his work on Avengers Endgame. And I kid you not, you can find these true facts on the internet. So gentlemen, with keen anticipation, I'll turn this over to you now.
Thank you, Bruce. I guess I need to say that we did not plan to share screens or do a PowerPoint, and so for the people who are asking, how come I can't see your screen? It's because we plan to just talk to you and with you. I think we would like to hear from you as well as talk at you. I was pretty amazed, Robert, that you have such an art director. Apparently, it's better than that. You are the 27th, or somebody carrying your name, somebody masquerading you as the 27th most productive art director in Hollywood. That is to say, dollars of return by art directors. Robert Fechtman is number 27 in the country. So pretty impressive.
The Robert Fechtman that Robert Fleming is talking about is a distant cousin of mine, and he does in fact work prolifically in Hollywood. And years ago, if Shirley Whitenack is on the chat here, she will remember that she was touring in Hollywood and she sent me a picture of a building with my name on the side. And of course it's my cousin, not me, but funny when you Google yourself and you find somebody who's much more famous than you are.
And for myself, I can tell you that I have long known that there was a Robert Fleming who was an erotic author from the South. So you can imagine how gothic that probably gets. But there's also a Robert Fleming who is a noted composer in Canada. And of course, when Robert Fechtman conjures up one of my alter egos, he goes for the pornographer rather than the composer.
I didn't read that as pornography. I just thought he told a good story.
Yeah, well,
he's apparently black as well, and I figured that probably meant he's not a relative of yours.
I haven't called him to ask. I figured that would be especially weird. But I will tell you that I once got an email out of the blue from a Robert F. Fleming who said, I just noticed your name on the internet and figured maybe we're related, and so hi, Robert Fleming. And I said, oh, great. What does the F in Robert F. Fleming stand for? My B is Bruce. And he wrote back and said, yeah, I'm actually Robert Fleming. A marriage between cousins got me my middle name being the same as my last name. So that's another thing the Flemings may be noted for. All right, enough of that. Our goal is to talk to you about the Stetson program and to give you what we took away as the gems. I think both Robert and I really hope that you all will tell us some of what you particularly wanted to pay attention to, or were surprised by, or whatever. And to that end, we actually sent out a request for those comments and got exactly one back. So feel free to drop them into the questions box here, or the chat if you're ready to share them with everybody. If you say chat to the entire audience, everybody will see it. If you pose questions, only those of us who are organizers, presenters, will see the questions, and we'll pick and choose and restate them in our own terms and share them with everybody. Or you can send us emails even at this late date. I expect both Robert and I have our email inboxes open. Stetson this year was a very different kind of approach in a couple of ways. Of course, it was a virtual program. And for those of you who were not paying close attention, you might not have realized that it extended over more days than usual. Emily Kyle is very persistent. Am I supposed to be able to see the speaker? No, we're both in our pajamas still. I don't know. Should we let him see us, Robert?
Is that an option?
It is. Stetson it started on Friday before it usually does. There's me. And let's see if I can request Robert Fechtman to put his picture up. You can't request it. You have to do it on your own, Robert. Oh, there you are. Hey. So it started on Friday with the SSA Mechanics Boot Camp, which I did not attend, and I haven't gone back and watched it, and I regret that, because what I've read and heard about it is that might have been really one of the best sessions of the whole program. Robert, I hope that you did your duty and went back and watched it for me.
Well, no, I didn't, but I watched a lot of the sessions, and to be honest, Robert, I can't remember now which sessions were plenary sessions and which ones were the ones that I watched on video that had been recorded prior. But before we say more, I want to point out that I picked 6 or 7 of the presentations that I thought were particularly good, and yet there were many of the presentations that deserve mention, and many of the presentations were by our fellow SNA members. I know Emily Kyle made a presentation and Mary Alice Jackson made a presentation, but the one that I'd love to start talking about first is Janet Lauder's wonderful presentation. I don't know if you got a chance to see it. I believe it was a breakout session. It was entitled When Parents and Grandparents Fail to Plan. And there were a lot of really good tidbits in there, and I hope others will speak up about lots of options, including court reformation of trusts and decanting and modification and merger and reformation. Did I mention that one already? Modification by consent under the Uniform Trust Code. And boy, if any of you didn't see it and you have the opportunity to go in the archive and see it, you should. Did you have a chance to see that one, Robert?
I did not, or I don't remember if I did. I don't remember if I explained this to you or to the whole group, but I took assiduous notes, knowing that I was going to have to do this, and I cannot for the life of me find the notes. And so I look at the topics and think, oh, I can remember. Oh, I can't remember a thing. What did I do?
Well, surely you remember at least the presentations that you made.
I think so. I hope none of those made your list. I see a couple of notes. Somebody says that the SSA boot camp was really like a special needs trust 101, which I think was, in fairness, was what it was intended to be. It was pretty basic, but focused on process. On, you know, then you do this, and then you have to file this thing, and then I'm not sure, you know, I guess maybe I should give up on the attempt to try to shoehorn things into the different sessions. Bryn says, David Banis had a great basic presentation. You know, we can actually let people talk in their own voices if they would like to. So everybody should know that if you raise your hand, we will unmute your microphone and let you talk about your observation or favorite thing. I wonder if I could embarrass Bryn enough to unmute her. And oh, she's self-muted. Bryn, if you unmute yourself, I will unmute you, and you can talk about the staff training that you're going to be doing, because that sounds like something I could get behind. Bryn. There we go. Hello, Bryn.
Hi. I don't have the paper in front of me, but David had a great presentation. Robert Fechtman, your comment about Janet's also really informative presentation reminded me that David from Janet's office did that basic session, and we are going to use the paper and go through it bit by bit, starting in our weekly staff meetings, and just kind of cover the highlights with our staff as really good refresher and training for new staff people. And I think the plan is, depending on how long that takes, we will then move on to some of Janet's materials from her session, because they were both so useful and helpful.
So are you going to play the video or just recast the materials?
Oh, I think we were just, I hadn't planned to do the video because I hadn't thought about how we could, if I still have access to that and how do I get that. So I wasn't planning on that, but we have the paper, and so we'll probably, I will just read a little section and then tell everyone else, you know, next week's assignment, we're going to talk about this. Here's the paper, read this. We'll talk about it.
Ron Lansman is complaining about your microphone, and I should share with everybody that in the sidebar you told us that you would only allow your voice to be heard if we promised not to turn on the video. So I'm about to turn on the video. No, I can't actually do that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not the greatest setup, and I was not planning on this, so I'm going to mute myself again.
I get it. And I was really going to say, Ron, you're going to have to just live with it, because when people impromptu turn on their microphones, you get what you get. Interesting idea. And it occurs to me that you could do the same thing more thoroughly. You could ask some of the presenters if they would present to your office group remotely. I mean, that's, you know, we've got to rethink how we do programs altogether. We like most of you probably, Robert, maybe you do the same thing. We have long had guest speakers come in, we've served them lunch and asked them to just talk to the staff about things of interest to the area. Well, why can't we have somebody from Cleveland do that now? We even get to save lunch. Robert, are you available for those phone sessions?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to listen to Janet's presentation again, getting back to what I heard there, because there were so many good ideas. Is it a frequent occurrence for you, Robert, that you are on the receiving end of a trust that's defective in somehow, or a plan that wasn't very well thought through, and you've got to do these decanting or modification or merger? I know you've been talking about these kinds of things for years yourself.
I'm a huge fan of decanting, but sometimes I think maybe I do too much of it. I'd solve all sorts of problems with decanting, but at least Arizona's Medicaid agency is a little dicey about whether they will accept the changes in a trust in a decanting. And so what I really like is to have somebody decant the trust in another state, so that I have a court from New Jersey or Indiana or someplace saying this is now the trust, and then I have less trouble, it seems to me, getting it through our state Medicaid agency. But I have to resist the temptation to make every trust better by decanting, which is kind of what I sometimes come to. Are you doing a lot of modifications?
Yes, we have a new statute in Indiana called a non-judicial settlement agreement. And I'm finding that's a little easier than decanting, because we just get all the parties to agree to do it. And we don't have to notify everybody in advance that we're going to decant and all those things that the Indiana statute requires. So the non-judicial settlement agreement has been working well for me. And it is amazing how often even people that saw a lawyer and tried to put together a plan, the plan doesn't work very well. A lot of people do special needs trusts who don't really know what they're doing. And I find even sometimes the people have gone in and they've changed the trust since the lawyer did it, and they've messed it up. So we can fix it in a variety of ways. I thought Janet really went into a lot of detail about all the different ways, and I'm kind of stuck in I was decanting and now I'm doing the non-judicial settlements. I've never done a merger, and I can't remember how that works, even though I listened to Janet's presentation.
I don't usually call them mergers, because there is of course, a legal notion of merging a trust and the interests merging. And so I usually call them combination, but I haven't really done it either. Though I've talked a lot about it. I've suggested that people could create a trust that they really liked and then just combine the bad trust with the trust that they liked under the Uniform Trust Code. The non-judicial modification is an attractive idea. I worry, and given the skittishness of our Medicaid agency, that they might view the special needs beneficiary as having participated in a modification that makes it a self-settled trust. So that hasn't been something that I've done a lot. Jim Caffrey's question is, your Medicaid agency ever questioned the non-judicial settlement agreement as an impermissible transfer? And that's basically what I would be anxious about. I haven't had experience doing it and then submitting it to our Medicaid agency. Actually, usually when I modify trusts, I try to obscure the basis on which I'm doing it as much as I can. I say, now the trustee pursuant to, and I cite the decanting statute, and then I cite the statute if there are the section of the trust, if there is one allowing amendments, and then I cite the statute on non-judicial agreements, and then say, and then the trustee restates the trust as follows. Our decanting statute explicitly allows the trust decanting to be by a restatement. So I argue that you don't need a new tax ID number, you don't need the new trust name, you just restate it. And that has actually been helpful, to have that scattershot approach to the authority to make the changes. But I haven't really been challenged on it, so maybe I should worry about it more than I do.
Janet also had an idea that she called invoking the spendthrift clause. And I don't know if you could probably explain that better than I can, Robert, but I took that to mean that you say that the beneficiary of the trust has no control over the money in the trust, and therefore it's not available to them.
Well, and I think I think you have the opposite problem more, that if you have a spendthrift provision and you nonetheless let the beneficiary have any control, then you might have run afoul of the protection the spendthrift provision gives. I know that there was I remember a case from our case law update a few years ago, Robert, that was the complaint of the Medicaid agency, that the beneficiary had been given a credit card that had direct access to the trust, and she was holding the trust check register. Her mother was the nominal trustee, but the beneficiary was the one who was making all the decisions. the Medicaid agency said that wasn't a trust at all. That was an available resource. And I think that in the middle of the litigation, if I remember that case correctly, the mother resigned as trustee. A sister took over as trustee, took back the checkbook and the credit card, and solved the problem going forward. But I believe, if I recall correctly, there was a big overpayment levied against the beneficiary during the period when she was running the trust.
That sounds familiar.
So I don't know if that's what Janet meant by invoking the spendthrift provision. I was just looking to see if Janet was on the line so she could tell us, and she is not.
There were two other presentations that I thought were somewhat similar that I thought I'd mention next, and they were right out of my favorite kinds of topics. We had Practical and Pesky Problems by Hi Darling, and then your partner, Elizabeth Freeman, did Problematic Trust Administration Issues. And I wrote down a number of the things that they covered, and I thought this would just be kind of an intro, but Hi was asking, who do you represent when you have these pesky trust problems? And then he talked about specific issues like medical marijuana or providing cash to your trust beneficiary, or the requirement to visit a trust beneficiary, or the perennial issues of buying them a vehicle or a house, or what about a pool or a hot tub? And let's see, I think, yes, it was Elizabeth who mentioned guns, and I actually had that issue come up just yesterday.
Of course you did.
Of course. I mean, you know, I have a lot of criminal element in my trust practice, but this guy wants me to buy him a gun, and I really don't want to. Let's use that as a launching point. I think you've told me that you have purchased guns for trust beneficiaries before, Robert.
I might have told you that, but it was probably after a scotch and I was just bragging. I don't remember ever having done it. I don't think I have.
Well, then, if you've not done it, would you do it?
I can imagine doing it, yes, but I would really have serious questions about it.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that somebody has a special needs trust particularly doesn't necessarily establish that they are incapacitated or incapable of making responsible decisions. So I think that would be my real question is, in my judgment as trustee, or my advice to the trustee if I'm representing the trustee, is this person responsible enough to safely use a weapon? But I'm not sure how many other questions I want to ask. Do I want to ask why they think they need a gun, or why they need an oversized magazine, or why they need a long gun as opposed to a handgun, or a handgun as opposed to a long gun? Do I want to know the answers to all those questions? What have you decided in your case, Robert?
Well, I'm not going to buy the gun. It just seems like a big risk in so many ways. And this guy's got a job. He doesn't earn a lot of money, but I told him he should buy the gun with his own money and ask me to pay other bills. That's my simple solution in that case. I did have a trust beneficiary a few years back, Robert, tell me he's a paraplegic, and he told me that he had heard he could get a special hunting license where he could fire a pistol instead of a rifle, and he could shoot the animals from his truck instead of getting out of the truck to shoot the animals. And for the life of me, I couldn't find reference in the Indiana law to this particular kind of hunting license he was talking about. But I don't know if you have something like that down in Arizona. You very well might.
I don't think so. For that kind of an arrangement, I'm sure you can hire him some time at a hunting ranch in Texas where they'll herd the buffalo right up to him and let him shoot him from a lawn chair. Actually, I happen to know that they do that with buffalo in Texas. So.
Oh my goodness. Well, we might have to get Bryn back on the audio for that.
So I don't know. I guess I've bought things that are dicey for people. Guns, not so much. But actually, right now I have a guy who has a 4x4, and he called us up and said that we paid for. It's titled to him. This is actually not a special needs trust. So it doesn't raise the two vehicle problem. but he bought a kind of an expensive 4x4, and he called us up not too long ago after a $50,000 or $60,000 investment in his 4x4, and said, well, that was too nice to really run into the desert and up into the mountains. And so he'd been hunting around and he'd found a $30,000 truck that he would like to have in addition, that could be his plaything, and then his $40,000, $50,000 one could be his way of getting to his imaginary job. And if he bought the $30,000, he thought it would really only take about $15,000 of additional work to make it really cherry, to make him the king of the hill, as it were, out in the wilderness. And I'm thinking, yeah, not only is that a frivolous, it is a $2 million trust, so he could afford it, but not only is it a frivolous investment, but this is a guy who had a head injury. And do I want a guy in a head injury driving 2 4x4s up in the wilderness? And don't even ask me to buy him a motorcycle. I'm not going there.
Yeah, one of the things on High's list was a pool or a hot tub, and I get requests for those kinds of things all the time. How do you feel about when the parents come to you and they say, we need the pool to provide therapy, or we have to have the hot tub because it's soothing and we do therapy in there? Are those the kinds of things that you're willing to purchase, Robert?
Yes, within reason. What I hear an awful lot from parents, and pardon me, and I'm not just trying to outgross you, because I know you're pretty good at gross stories, but I hear a lot that the therapy pool particularly, and swimming generally, will help a lot with bowel movements. Will make the paraplegic or quadriplegic much better able to eliminate. I've heard that often enough that I suspect that it might even be true. But my go-to on that kind of an expense is, let's start with a letter from somebody with some set of initials after their name. It doesn't have to be a doctor, it could be a physical therapist, telling me why this is a good idea, not just it would be nice, but a reason that it's a good idea. And then step 2 is, I need a budget, and let's see what you're proposing to spend. I once took a request for not just a pool, but also the solar heater that was going to add about $5,000 or $8,000 to the cost, the cover that would have to be motorized so that the paraplegic beneficiary could operate it herself, so she didn't have to wait for her parents in order to go swimming. That was going to add another $20,000, and it would need a Hoyer chair to allow her easy access, and that was going to cost another $30,000, and that added up to about $80,000 on top of a pool by the time they got all done. So I said, great, let's go ask the judge, knowing full well what the judge would say. And that woman wants to fire me even today, 10 years later, because I didn't get her that pool.
I know it's a common thing. I've got 2 comments, I guess. One is, I have at least 3 trust beneficiaries who are trust beneficiaries because they nearly drowned. Mm-hmm. And it just seems like a very risky proposition beyond the cost of the thing. Once you have the pool, there's so many things that can go wrong with it. And then my other comment is, I had a case where we just did a little friendly evaluation of how often would they use the pool, and were they going to use it for therapy, and how often would they be using it for therapy. And then we checked with the local YMCA at what a pool membership would cost. And I think we found we could join the Y and be members there for 100 years before we'd pay for the pool.
You might even be able to buy the Y.
Maybe.
Ken Bloom says he had a beneficiary insisting that the pool include a grotto. So apparently that was somebody who wanted the Playboy Mansion as their residence. There's one sort of related thing that I wish somebody could figure out how to do easily. I have this conversation with family members all the time when they say, we want to fix up the bedroom, we want to get a new pool, we want to do the landscaping, and we figure it's an investment, because if you'll spend $20,000 on this, well, it'll add $20,000 to to the value of the house. And what I need is somebody who can reliably say, yeah, if you put $20,000 into landscaping, it'll add $10,000 to the value of a house, or whatever the right numbers are. I know that there is essentially nothing you can do other than replacing a missing roof, probably, that will increase the value of the house more than the cost of the work. But it would be great to have a resource that you could point to people and say, on average, 20,000 of landscaping adds 5,000 or 10,000 or whatever it does to the value. On average, a $30,000 pool adds $10,000 to the value of the house. Do you know of something like that?
No, I do sometimes have evaluations done. I have a couple of contractors that I've used for those evaluations, but that's normally we do that when we're going to the court and we're going to ask the court for permission to spend money on something. And I want to be able to tell the court that we've looked into it beyond just my opinion. I think a lot of my own opinion, but the courts don't.
I think a lot of your opinion. I have found that that Zillow will tell you some improvements that they want you to make to your house. You could put $40,000 into a new kitchen and increase the value. And they actually say, if you put $40,000 into your house, into your kitchen, it'll increase the value by $30,000. There is some remote place on Zillow that will do that, but I don't think my judge is going to be any more impressed by Zillow than he is by me.
Well, and doesn't that maybe depend on your taste? If you put in some ugly pink tile, you might lower the value of the house.
Well, and Ken Bloom says if you put a pool in, you might actually decrease the value of the house because of the safety issues. I know at least out here in Arizona where backyard pools were for many years de rigueur. There's a thriving industry of people who fill in and remove pools for precisely that reason, that the homeowners would rather not have the cost of maintaining a pool or the liability issues.
How do you feel about the issues like alcohol, tobacco? I have been told that I'm a little bit puritanical about that. I don't like to spend the trust money on things like that. Are there time, and I believe we've discussed this before, Robert. I feel like you told me about some cases where you do pay for those sorts of things.
I am not puritanical in any way. If a trust beneficiary, and especially a special needs trust beneficiary, wants to smoke weed, I started to say opposite sex companionship, but I don't actually care whether they're opposite or same sex. If they want to have companionship, I think my job is to try to make it happen. Now, there is the mechanical problem. How do you hire a hooker using your TrueLink card or whatever mechanism you're going to try to do it? How do you buy marijuana when you can't write a check or use a credit card? So those are challenges to work through, but I think our job is to figure out how to do it and to not have the sense to the beneficiary be, oh, I'm sorry, you can't do that because you have a disability.
I like your attitude. I'll change my own.
One of the things that I kind of liked from the general session was the Sean Murphy fiduciary litigation update. I liked it for a couple of reasons. One is it's really interesting. You know, in some ways I was annoyed when they put that on the agenda because it sounds a little bit like stealing thunder from yours and my case law update at the end of the program. But it turned out not to be that. And it's nice to have somebody with a different emphasis, a litigation person, first of all, and then also thinking about larger issues of trust validity and trust implementation and trustee duties that aren't necessarily focused on just special needs trusts. And so it was really nice to have that different survey. And I noticed reviewing his materials to see how much I could remember of what he said, that a lot of his cases were trial court cases, which you and I, of course, generally eschew, but it's very revealing about the thinking of what's actually going on in trial court proceedings. Of course, because only federal court trial court proceedings are regularly reported. That means that we were looking at federal issues. But that's a really good paper too. I can say from reviewing it for today that it was a nice survey of some of the things that have recently come up in fiduciary litigation. Steve Dale says, we paid for a special companion in Nevada with a court order for a quad. It was his special wish, he says. Actually,
what did you call the petition, Steve?
Actually, I want to, if I can get Steve on the phone, I'm going to try to unmute him because Steve, I want you to talk about one of your presentations and you can talk about going to Las Vegas too if you want. But the ABLE Act presentation, I'd like to, since we've got you, rather than us talking about what you said, we could have you kind of recap what you had to say.
Okay, assuming you can hear me.
Yep, we got you.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah, I wish I could take full credit for the ABLE Act presentation, but a lot of that was Pete Wall, who obviously is a rising star in the area. I particularly like the presentation, but what's really interesting about it is the paper and the materials included information for what the ABLE accounts have been used for and what they haven't been used for, which has always been an issue because, you know, one of my problems with a lot of ABLE programs here is they're promoting a product where they have no idea what it's being used for. And, you know, in the field, and to my knowledge, this is the first time we've ever had anything that gave us some idea. And I know that I've been sharing that with a lot of the ABLE groups out there here, and it's been quite a surprise.
And I think, if I remember correctly, that it was this presentation. This is one of the few that I could independently remember when I went back and looked at him. He talked not only about some of the kinds of expenditures, the categories of expenditures, which he has to extrapolate a little bit to figure out what it is people are spending the money on, but also the typical size and the in and out flow in ABLE accounts, and how, in a broader sense, how they're actually being used or not used, how many of them. I think everybody thought when ABLE passed that the community would view it as an investment vehicle. I never saw it as an investment vehicle, and my recollection is that that's really what his numbers say as well, that it's
and I think that's what it bears out. I mean, I think it's incredibly valuable. And in fact, I'll tell you, if you want, what I'll do is, if I can find it here, I'll post it on the SNA listserv. But it gives us some idea of what the average account size is, which is small. Most of these accounts have become money in, money out accounts. In fact, that's all of the accounts we set up. Well, all 90% of the accounts we use are money in, money out.
And so they're being used for immediate needs, or maybe they're using them for housing as a backdoor way to subsidize housing, but they're not accumulating money, and they're not growing particularly.
No, they're not. And the one thing that came out of it, which wasn't amazing, is people with these disabilities like to eat, apparently. That's what they use it for more than anything else. The thing about it, and I think it has to do with education here, is what it's not being used for is housing here. Now, I know we got a little pushback from our friend Doug at Stable that says, well, there's some other ways they pay for housing, but actually, if you dig down, it's really being underutilized for housing. And, you know, those of us as advocates, this whole thing of using it to, for lack of a better word, launder the money to get around the ISM reduction, that's huge here. And it's not getting the traction it deserves. As an aside, there's about to be a change in the leadership of the of NDI, which oversees the ABLE National Resource Center, and I know the new director, and he is going to be incredibly collegial with us, and I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities here, one, to educate the communities and also to be more relevant as far as that's concerned. But I would really, for anybody who's doing much work as far as ABLE, I thought that paper is incredibly valuable here, and I think it for a lot of us work with different ABLE programs. I think it's the first time we've ever had any insight on what this product is actually being used for. And in fact, CalABLE, they pride themselves on that we have no idea what people use it for. We don't ask them any questions and that kind of thing. But the problem, I mean, it is problematic. So there we go. On my fellow with his special trip to originally when he put in the request, it was to go to what looked like a dude ranch, and then it turned out that those weren't dudes here, and we got a court. Although if they were, I wouldn't have had a problem with it, but the amount of work that went into his special evening was, I think easily we probably spent $10,000 to $15,000 for his special evening. But you know, the judge really got into it, and in fact, he wanted a full report, which we were not able to give him here. But he was just so proud of himself that he authorized this special evening.
Before I let you go, Steve, Leonard Berg says, hey, what are the implications for ABLE Acts being used, as you say, money in, money out, rather than savings? Because didn't the states think that they were going to make money off of ABLE Act accounts, that they were going to have like 529 accounts, they were going to be a marketing windfall for the states?
Well, some of us might remember that ABLE didn't start off as a love fest with the special needs community here, and they were projecting huge amounts of money going into these accounts, and the fact is that I forget what the number is, but it's incredibly small.
It's like between 10 and 25%. I don't remember the number, but it's a fraction of the absolute number of accounts that they projected, and as you say, they're smaller than they projected on average as well.
And yet, for the people we serve, a lot of folks it has for working disabled, for those of us that are in Region 5 and Region 9 here, just laundering the money through an ABLE account slows down all the accountings that are being requested and that kind of thing. It has so many different uses. I'm a big fan of this thing. And I wasn't always.
But I don't think that encouraging people to use it in the way that it is being used is any risk to the idea. I can tell you that I sat on Arizona's legislative committee that decided whether to set up our own ABLE account or to go with somebody else's. And there was a person from the Treasurer's office and a person from the Department of Health and Human Services. Actually, that's not the name of the agency, but the name just fell out of my head. And advocates on the committee, and nobody went in thinking that this was going to be anything but a cost to the state. So at least by the time it passed, and certainly before the ABLE Act accounts actually got set up, people understood that this was going to be a modest drain, but a drain on the public fisc. And the idea was, how can we provide a good service with the minimum financial impact for the state? And I know.
Well, that's not how all states work. California is working off a loan that's supposed to be repaid, I think, next year, and I think that they're $6 million in the hole right now. There's just no way in hell that, it's just incredibly unrealistic, and I think a lot of the programs are figuring that out. Be that as it may, it's a great program.
Yeah.
It has a lot of benefit, but once again, I think that the disability community is out of touch with it. I don't know about you guys. I'm amazed. I just did a program for NAMI. You'd think they'd never heard of it before. It's just not getting the traction Here we have one person, here Miranda Kennedy, who is one of the most enthusiastic advocates out there, but it's one person here who's promoting this whole thing. And so once again, I think as a disability advocate, there's a lot of value of ABLE. It's not the end solution it was supposed to be, and it never was going to be. And it's also, I think, a great opportunity for the Special Needs Alliance here. And I think we should, be looking at increasing our efforts. And the change of leadership in NDI, I think, is going to be tremendous coming up. So
thank you.
I'm jazzed about ABLE. But
Thank you.
I'll post the paper. I think I find this paper incredibly useful, and I think it's the first time we've ever had insight into how the product is actually being used.
Thanks for your comments. I think, Steve, you and I may be the people who are the most jazzed about ABLE out there, but I am also jazzed with you.
Well, I like it a lot too, Robert, and I think it's a good segue into the next presentation I wanted to talk about, because I thought Amos Goodall did a great job talking about trustees sending funds electronically and what goes wrong. My kind of spin on that is I'm caught up thinking about all the times when my trust beneficiaries say they need cash for things, they need spending money. And if you have an ABLE account for them, then I guess you can contribute money to the ABLE account and they can have their spending money that way. But what if they can't have an ABLE account? Can you share with us some ideas, Robert, that you've had for providing them with spending money?
So we for a long time we still have a staff member who is a runner who goes to the court and delivers our deposits to the bank and does all that. But about a third of his job was delivering checks to various banks. We would try to get our trust beneficiaries to bank at a bank that was physically close to us and that we had good relationships with. And they would never like that bank because they didn't have branches around the corner, or they didn't like the debit card or whatever. So they would end up at a different bank. And we were going to, on a typical day, this runner was going to 3 or 4 different banks to make deposits. And we just, when we moved our office a year ago, it's incredible to me to think we have been in this space for a year, or just coming up on a year, and that entire time we have been under lockdown. But when we moved, we just announced we're not going to do that anymore. We've got to find another way. And it turned out to be easier to find another way than we thought. I'm with Amos that there are risks with doing it all electronically, but if you tell your trust beneficiaries it's going to take you 3 days to get a check in the mail, amazingly they can usually figure out a way to live with that if you don't give them the option of running down and depositing it. But I will say that our single biggest change in that regard is we use TrueLink cards a lot, not just for special needs beneficiaries. We have 80-year-old widowers who have TrueLink cards for all of their daily actions, and they may have a debit card and a ton of money, but the TrueLink card just works really well for us as trustees to figure out what the expenditures actually were. We don't have to get receipts back to prove the expenditures. We don't have to try to get them to tell us what they're doing. We send TrueLink cards all over creation.
What if they spend the TrueLink money at Walmart? You can't really tell what they bought, can you?
Well, if they're a special needs beneficiary, we set it to not buy food. And do we double check to make sure that there isn't any food on the Walmart bill? No, we don't, because Social Security isn't either in our experience. And as soon as they start saying, yeah, you've got the settings right, but Walmart is selling the milk, then we'll have to start dealing with it. But we haven't had that experience. That it has in fact been quite the opposite. Social Security is not asking, I mean, they just see TrueLink and they think it's magic. They don't even ask to see our settings to show them that we have restricted it. So in theory, it shouldn't buy food. just spot checking and being observant, we see that there is some food being purchased with TrueLink cards, but not that often. We actually have more often where trust beneficiaries contact us and say, the TrueLink card just stopped working, I can't get, and then they tell us something that they're perfectly okay getting, but somehow the wrinkle in the TrueLink has kept them from getting that thing. The other thing related to that is that, and I don't know if this is still true, you remember Uber and Lyft from back when you could go places? It used to be that Uber would not accept the TrueLink card. Lyft would, and we had a hard time retraining some of our beneficiaries that they were just going to have to take Lyft instead of Uber. Steve Dale says they're definitely checking. Social Security is definitely checking in the San Francisco region for the settings on the TrueLink cards. And that's, whenever Steve says that, it surprises me because I'm in the San Francisco region and we just don't have that. So maybe they're just checking Steve. Not to make you paranoid or anything, Steve, but have you considered that they're just looking over your shoulder?
Well, I'd love an explanation of that, Steve. When you say they're checking the settings, are they able to check the settings, or are they asking you what the settings are?
Maybe I misunderstood. They're going through the expenditures and they're looking for food. They're not actually looking at the settings. So maybe I misunderstood, but we're getting about 2 a week, and I'm not so sure it's not me.
I was kidding, but your description now makes perfect sense. It seems to me that what Social Security ought to be doing is saying, show us the settings screen from your TrueLink, Mr. Administrator, to show that you have set it not to do food. And then if an occasional item of food shows up, we're just not going to care. Rather than say, let us look at the list. Oh, milk. Oh, Brad, you have an overpayment of $12.37. That strikes me as unproductive. But then,
well, the other possibility is the Ohio program, the stable program, ties a TrueLink card to enable account. So, when that works, it's kind of the best of both worlds.
Yep.
I get a lot of TrueLink people saying, I really, really need the money to buy clothes. And we talk about a budget, and I put that amount on the TrueLink card, and then the first thing they do is run out and buy a bunch of other crap that they didn't tell me they were going to buy with it. And then they tell me, hey, I wasn't able to get all those clothes. I need some more money for the clothes. And I don't know, I struggle with, I love the TrueLink card, and like you, Robert, I use them all the time, but they're not foolproof. The one area where I really do like it is at the gas pump, because you can set it so that they can only buy the gas at the pump. They can't go into that mini mart and wreak havoc in there with God knows what. And I get a little frustration initially when they say, well, I tried to pay for my gas and I couldn't do it, and we have to educate them about how to do it at the pump. But I like that part of it a lot.
The one in particular one I wanted to point out, partly because I had a comment from somebody, and then there's another comment that I need to get back to too, was the Mario Byrne conversation with Ken Brown, Greg Wilcox. And Greg, I'm gonna embarrass you here and unmute you.
Here I am. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Roberts.
Yes.
So you had said that you were particularly pleased to hear from Ken Brown that you can have a toggle trust. And did you mean, I didn't hear this, or if I did, it went over my head, which is more likely. Are we talking about third-party special needs trusts that could toggle back and forth?
Yeah, I didn't specify, but that was the context. And what was reassuring was that Ken Brown said clearly that there was nothing in the POMs that prevents you from putting in provisions that makes it a discretionary trust and advises the trustee that the discretion can be exercised to operate as a special needs trust if that in fact is in the best interest of the beneficiary.
So mechanically, how do you do that when you draft the trust? Do you say the trustee has to make a declaration, or what do you do to effect the toggle?
I have two sets of provisions. I have a overall discretionary provision that applies, and then it says that the trustee can use discretion to pay for support and maintenance. But if the trustee decides that it's better for the beneficiary to operate as a special needs trust, the trustee can limit the distributions to distributions that do not prejudice the benefits.
So
At
there's no
the bottom, these are discretionary trusts. The discretionary trusts can be operated in any way, obviously because they're discretionary, that the trustee deems appropriate. And you can put in the trust itself some guidelines about how discretion should be operated.
Yep. Okay. Thanks. And that's kind of what I thought you meant, but I wanted to make sure. So thanks for joining us. And Butenhoff sent us a message saying, wait a minute, were we able to view the materials, both the recordings and the printed materials forever, or were they cut off? I believe the answer is they were cut off, were they not? Robert?
Well, you're probably right. I know I sought access because there were some programs I hadn't watched before today, and they gave me access, but that's just a special Robert thing, I guess.
So you called them up and asked them to let you have it?
Yeah, but that must be true in general. They're limited, so we can't, after today, people can't go in and see the things that we piqued their interest about.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that is what it is, I guess. Hey, do we have time to talk about another section?
We have exactly time to talk about one more section.
Well, then if you think this is a bad one, we'll choose another one. But I wanted to talk about Shirley Whitenack's presentation on the super fiduciary issues, which I found on the one hand to be fascinating, on the other hand, a little scary. I mean, a trustee of a special needs trust is a super fiduciary, aren't we? We have a lot of requirements on us that a normal trustee wouldn't have. And I thought one of the things that she brought up that was very interesting is care management. And I wonder if you've got social workers on your staff, don't you, Robert? You have people who their job for you is to deal with those kinds of care management and social issues and things that come up with your guardianships and with your trusts.
Yes, 4 of them, in fact.
I thought it was at least 3. Now I don't have anybody like that on my staff, so my trust administrators end up filling that role a lot themselves. Sometimes we hire it out, but for those of us who have a fiduciary practice and we don't have the case management or the care management part of it taken care of like you do you have some ideas for us? How can we get this done?
This is actually a general practice management observation that I'll make. It was true 35 years ago when I first applied it, and I believe that it's still true, that you have to bite the bullet. You have to say, I'm going to take the proverbial leap of faith. I'm going to believe that this will pay for itself. I'm going to hire a case manager. And even though they are underutilized for the next 6 months, I'm prepared to lose half of their salary as being uncompensated for 6 months while we sort it out. And I predict that you will find that you don't have to go 6 months, that they'll pay for themselves in the first month. And that's always been true for me. I can't tell you exactly why, but I think that it's just the nature of the business.
Well, how do you mean they pay for themselves? Do you mean that when they're involved in your guardianship or trust case that you pay them out of the guardianship funds or you pay them out of the trust funds, or do you is that absorbed into the work that your office is doing?
The latter, but their billable hours will exceed their salary in very short order. They're legitimately billable hours. You will find that you use them far more than you thought you were going to for a far broader variety of things than you intended to when you started, and they will generate income in excess of their cost. Now, you know, the old rule of thumb about hiring an associate attorney is that they need to bill and collect something between 2 and 3 times their salary and benefits in order to be productive. And I think that's also true for non-lawyer employees like case managers. And I predict if you do it, you'll find that it pays for itself.
Well, that's great. I think it's actually 5:01. Have we overstayed our welcome as usual?
I think we have, as we always do. I'm sorry that we didn't. We coordinated our shirts better than we might have. We usually make a conscious effort to do that when we're doing the Stetson program itself.
Well, I always strive to look as much like you as I can, Robert. So
I'm so sorry.
Now my goal is to get rid of my glasses.
Yes, I will be happy to share with everybody how to do that. But you'll have to ask me later. Well, everybody except Robert, who knows. So thank you, everybody. I think we are done. Jahan, are you still there? Is there something you would like to say to the assembled multitudes before we shut down this program?
Just thank you guys so much for sharing, and be on the lookout for emails on armchair chats and the spring meeting dates. And happy holidays.
Oh, yeah, happy holidays, everybody.
Yeah, you know, that's coming up.
And we're going to sign off now. The other thing that we might have said about Robert Fechtman that is actually true is that he's a very nice singing voice and is an accomplished singer. So we're gonna sign everybody else out, and then he and I are going to sing "Release Happy God" to each other.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce.